I have been an ordained minister for almost 30 years. I was thinking about that this week while I was at Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley, where I serve as a trustee. And when I'm there, I'm often surrounded by lots and lots of very intelligent people who are just experts in their fields, professors and the president of our school, the dean. And I just am amazed at what so many people have to offer. And one thing in particular struck me this last Monday and Tuesday while I was in Berkeley was a sense of gratitude. Now, in the 28 and a half years that I've been ordained, I have spoken about gratitude every single year and many, many times, not just the Sunday before, after Thanksgiving in November, but throughout the year, because gratitude is fundamentally a part of what it means to be Christian. If you choose to follow Jesus, you're choosing to be grateful about something. So after almost 3 decades of attending church and preaching sermons on gratitude and singing songs and watching dances and praying, thanking God, I came across something about gratitude a few weeks ago that just kind of stopped me dead in my tracks. It was in Diana Butler Bass's book, Grateful, The Transformative Power of Giving Thanks, where the entire final section is on politics and gratitude. I know, that's what I thought. So when I saw this, I thought, my gosh, I don't feel very grateful when I'm watching the news most days. I have a feeling I'm not alone. But that idea of politics and gratitude just grabbed me because I thought, now, if there's any area in my life where gratitude might be missing, it probably has to do with politics, because I often get angry when I listen to the news or when I read the news, or if I see a video or happen to watch the news on TV. I thought to myself, what is there about politics and gratitude that must come together as I'm reading this book about spirituality and gratitude? I just finished, I think yesterday morning, reading John Meacham's book, his most recent one called The Soul of America, which has to do with finding our better angels. In fact, that's a part of the subtitle as well. But as I was reading his book, it occurred to me that he was also suggesting that all people, not just Christians, but all people would realize that there's something to be grateful for in the midst of whatever's going on in our country, in our nation's capital, in the capitals of the world, and it's important to express our gratitude. So I wanted to go a little bit deeper. I didn't want to just say, okay, God, thanks for politics and thanks for the government and all that we're doing and, pie in the sky. I definitely got deeper. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I had this sermon pretty much prepared, and I didn't feel like I could do it justice. We had a wonderful play by our children on gratitude, and we had a song by the children on gratitude. We had other people get up and speak, and I felt like I was going to have to rush through it and didn't want to do that. And so I talked a little bit about this sign right here that all of you made a few weeks ago, and it basically says, with gratitude, welcoming all and sharing our blessings. And then each person had the opportunity to write a blessing on one of these little stickers and then stick it on here. And I realized that somebody made the shape of a cross down below, which I thought was kind of cool. But anyway, this was really what we did instead. We focused on the rainbow and the United Church of Christ comma, reminding us that God is not through speaking to us, et cetera, et cetera. And I told everybody, I've got a sermon for you, but I'm going to save it for 2 weeks, and I'm just going to give you some tidbits. So if you heard the same scripture 2 weeks ago and thought that I had just lost my mind, or I'm getting so old I can't remember what the scriptures were 2 weeks ago, it's intentional. I really wanted for today's message to sink in a little bit, and I felt like I wanted the time to spend on a really important message of gratitude in politics. So in John Meacham's book, he talks about the very dark times in our nation's history. He talks about the Civil War. He talks about civil rights. He talks about McCarthyism. And he calls out people, mainly presidents, governors, senators, and congressmen in our nation's history, where he actually quotes some of their speeches, some of the things that they have said that are racist, that are sexist, that are, I guess the isms or the ists could go on and on and on. But as I read through the entire book, I thought I had no idea how much prejudice and hatred came out of the mouths of some of our nation's leaders in pretty much every decade that we have been around as a country. And he talks about presidents who owned slaves and justified that, and many who quoted Bible verses. He talks about presidents who ordered the slaughter of millions of Native Americans in order for our country to expand. He talks about presidents who ordered wars that were unnecessary. Now, I'm sure if everybody in this room read the entire book, there would be some things that some of you would probably say, well, maybe that was a good decision. But for the most part, as you read through Meacham's book, just about everything he says, you're just filled with, or at least I was, dread over the fact that there is so much intolerance among us and that it has always been there. And every once in a while, it raises its ugly head in a really big way. And I know you're wondering, what's this have to do with gratitude? And I'm getting there. But let me read you something that he also said about Georgia Governor Clifford Walker in 1924. Now, this is a governor of one of the states of our great nation speaking to the Ku Klux Klan. He said these words, "I would build a wall of steel, as high as heaven, against the admission of a single one of those Southern Europeans who never thought the thoughts or spoke the language of a democracy in their lives." Now, as I was reading this, I thought, wait a minute, Southern Europeans, I think we all know that democracy kind of started in Greece, which is part of Southern Europe. And as I was reading about Governor Walker, it occurred to me that if he had his way, we would not have a single Italian or Greek or Portuguese, or maybe even somebody from southern France. I'm not quite sure where he would draw the line across Europe, but I'm sure he had in his mind where that line would be. But as I read these words, I thought, oh my gosh, we've been talking about building walls for a long time to keep some people out and to keep some people in. But as I was reading today's gospel lesson, a parable that Jesus told, and a parable is just a story with a message or with a meaning, it occurred to me that Jesus talked about a wall of a completely different kind. John, the gospel writer, calls it a sheepfold. And it's basically a very sturdy wall, or else a fence that basically does the same job as a wall. And it's to keep the sheep inside the wall for safety at night, or if there's danger or a storm. It also, the wall's purpose is to keep out the thief. Now, in the story, we have three main characters. We have a shepherd, and the shepherd's job is to make sure that the sheep are safe and well-fed and not in danger, to care for the sheep. We also have a thief, and the thief's job is to steal the sheep from the shepherd. And actually, as John writes about it, to kill the sheep, to destroy the sheep. And then finally, we have a gatekeeper who makes sure that the shepherd can come in and out as his pleasure, and the sheep are free to come in and out as well. A different way of thinking about a wall. And it's interesting to me as I think about those three main characters. I often think when I'm reading the parables, what did Jesus really mean? And sometimes I think in our interpretations we get it right, and sometimes I think, well, maybe that's not exactly what he meant. But let's look for just a moment at those three main characters and what it must have been like for the people in the first century to hear this parable. First of all, Jesus was talking to Jews. And in Jewish theology, if you were a Jew and you heard the shepherd or the good shepherd, you immediately thought of God. Every single person that heard Jesus speaking most likely immediately thought of the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." It's a story, a vision of abundance and of safety and peace. In the first century, if you were Jewish and somebody was telling the story about a shepherd, you immediately thought of God and this beautiful vision. We also have to remember that the people who were Jewish that lived in that part of the world in the first century lived in occupied territory. The Roman government had basically taken their land, and the Roman emperor was in charge. And so when people thought of Rome, they immediately thought, now there's the thief. For that government takes and takes and takes and takes and doesn't give anything back. In fact, the Roman government took so much from the people that probably over 90% of the people didn't have enough money for food and shelter and health care. And when Jesus told the story about a thief, they would have immediately thought about the government who just not only steals from us, but quite literally kills us. Because life was shorter for those people because of the politics of imperial Rome. And then you've got this gatekeeper that keeps his eye on the gate. And I'm sure that the people who were listening to the parable thought, gee, I wonder if Jesus in this parable is going to make himself the shepherd or the gatekeeper. Let's find out. But I'm sure they were all shocked when Jesus said, guess what, folks? I'm the gate. And as I read that, I thought, okay, I've heard this parable so many times for so many years, and I wonder why Jesus chose to be the gate. And this is where gratitude comes into the picture for me. So in this beautiful vision, where there's abundance out there everywhere, and every single one of those sheep has permission to go out in safety and to eat from the abundance of the land. And whenever there's any sense of danger or insecurity, there was that gate through which the sheep could go through in order to be safe and be at peace. Jesus is basically saying in this parable, I'm the gate. You're free to the abundance of the land. You're free, all of you. This is the new vision for every single person to be able to live without violence and safety and peace. Jesus talked about a wall, but only in so much that he was the gate that allowed every single person to come in and out, that we would all enjoy the abundance. And because it was Jesus who was speaking, we know that none of us who are considered his sheep have permission from Jesus to keep anybody else out or in. Jesus, as the gate, is basically saying, you're always welcome to go out and enjoy the abundance of the land, to share it with others, and you're always welcome to come back in. and be grateful. Not only because there is enough abundance now, but also because there are people and always have been people who are willing to share it, even if there are those who don't, even if there are governments who don't. I wanted to read to you just a little bit more from Meacham. As I think about his book, there's one person in particular that stands out. Meacham kind of closes, or at least after, in the midst, towards the end of the discussion in his book, talks about how there is so much good in the world. And there are good leaders, and there are good politicians, and there are many, many, many good things. And it's important to look at the good and celebrate it and give thanks, but it's also important to realize that there is a vision that our world can be better for everyone, and that there are many, many people that want that, and we can give thanks for that even during the dark times in our nation's history. And he says, as he's gone back and looked at every single dark time that he mentions in the book, he said, you know what, every one of those is survivable. We survived it, and we came out stronger afterwards. And we have to believe that that will continue to be the pattern. If you think about the Civil War, we were a better country afterwards. If you think about civil rights, that was tough, but we were a better country afterwards, and we're still working on it. Anyway, in the book, he talks about John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, who was 25 years old in the march in 1965 between Selma and Montgomery, Alabama, and how when John was walking in the march, soldiers and policemen rushed at the marchers and started swinging at him, and John was hit on the head. John Lewis basically felt himself passing out as all these people were stepping over him and stepping on him, and he thought he was going to die. He talks about that in some of his biographical quotes. He thought he was laying there thinking, this is it for me, and it's worth it. Well, here's what Meacham wrote about John Lewis. For Lewis, the civil rights struggle always centered on whether the best of the American soul, the grace and the love, the godliness and the generosity, could finally win out over the worst, the racism, the hatred, the fear, and the cruelty. In the end, after the marches and the beatings and the riots, the light has largely triumphed over the darkness. And Meacham reminds us that has been the case over and over again to give us hope and allow us to be political with a sense of gratitude. And now, here's what Lewis himself said. This is a direct quote from Lewis. I always felt growing up that in the South there was evil, but also good. So much good. I believe that we will lead America to what Dr. King called the beloved community. In the final analysis, one family, one house, not just the house of black and white, but the house of the South, the house of America. We can move ahead. We can create a multiracial community, a truly democratic society. I think we are on the way there. There may be some setbacks, but we are going to get there. John Lewis reminds me quite strongly of the connection between gratitude and politics. And as I was reading his book, I was just imagining gratitude as a bird with wings. And one wing of the bird of gratitude is being grateful for all that is already good. And the other wing of the bird is being grateful for a vision that things can be better and that there are always people that are committed to making them better, no matter how dark the storms may be. And in this metaphor that I had of gratitude as a bird, I thought, there are those days when it's blue skies, smooth sailing. The bird has really not much to worry about at all. But we all know that it doesn't last. There's a storm that comes, and the bird gets tossed around a bit up in the sky. But again, the blue sky comes again. And it's so important when we feel like we are going through rough storms politically that we know with grateful hearts that the blue skies will come back and things will be better than they were before the struggle and before the darkness. I was filled with gratitude, as John Meacham pointed out in his book, time after time after time, as people were racist and sexist and LGBTQist and over and over and over. After the struggle, life was actually better for most of us. In fact, probably for all of us, if we would just open our eyes and celebrate the goodness all around us. I don't know about you, but I have a feeling that tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and listen to the news, and I'm going to think, oh, it's going to be hard to be grateful for that news, but it's important that we can and that we do look for the good that is here now and the good that we are fighting for and struggling for and making happen. Amen.